The Holy Gospel this morning comes from St. Luke in the 15th chapter. You may be seated. This one's rather long, and you can have a rest. But famous. So then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up, go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And then the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now, his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called to one of the slaves, and he asked what was going on, and he replied, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound. Well, then the elder son became angry and refused to go in. So his father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you've never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who's devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Well, then the father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. The Gospel of the Lord. So I'm going to go on a limb here and assume that most of you have heard this story. Mark Twain called it the greatest story ever written. And this from a man who once wrote a pretty good story about a boy named Huck and a trip down a river. But it is the greatest story perhaps ever told, because whether you've heard Jesus' version of this story or not, you have heard it 1,000 times in your life throughout television, movies, books. It's a tale that goes back thousands and thousands of years, long before Jesus ever decided to make it into his own parable. It is a tale of a father with 2 sons. But it is not so much a tale of 2 sons and a father as it is about us, and about how every time we hear this story, we struggle. We struggle to accept the radical truth that we know in our heart of hearts, that the reason why we like this story is because it is so true. It's not because we wonder about the younger son or sympathize with the older son or are amazed at the generosity of the father, but because we know in our heart of hearts that this is true. I don't think it will take any of you in this room much time to put yourself in the situation of the younger son. You can remember vividly when you were in the wrong, When you had ventured out onto paths unknown, into the distant country, the far country, as it used to be called. He journeyed to the far country. I love that phrase. And you went there and you did what you all thought was right, and it was great, and it was going to be good, except then it was a failure, a colossal failure perhaps. So much so that you were so embarrassed you couldn't even admit how bad of a failure it was. And you had to put your tail between your legs and slink back home or wherever it might have been, to your colleagues or your spouse or your children, whatever it was, even yourself, and admit that you had made a mistake. And that you weren't really worth all that much. That somehow along the line in the process of this, you'd decided that this particular failure is going to be the end of you, and pretty much it was just, might as well die anyhow. And when you got there, the person you were apologizing to, the person for whom you were seeking forgiveness, showed you love and generosity and forgiveness beyond your wildest imagination. I know you can remember that story. And I don't care if it happened to you 70 years ago. You still remember it as if it was yesterday. Because that grace and forgiveness that was given to you when it was completely unmerited on your part, that grace and forgiveness that was offered to you by somebody who went out of their way to welcome you back into the fold after you knew that you had failed so egregiously, you never forget that. Because it happens so rarely. But the other reason why, of course, it's so true is because who hasn't been the elder son? Who hasn't been the one who has patiently, faithfully, dutifully done what has been asked of them, filled their responsibilities and expectations, probably to the T, with dotting I's all along the way? And in the process of doing this, your work, your time, your effort goes vastly underappreciated, and someone who has seemingly done nothing, has squandered everything, gets all the accolade and all the reward, and there you sit with nothing but being ignored, disrespected, taken advantage of. You might not even have to think back to past last week to come up with that one. It happens so often because so few of us know how to say thank you or really be grateful. And so you know in your heart of hearts that this greatest story ever told, as Mark Twain said, is great not because it's poetic, but because it's so radically true. But what's even more astounding, of course, is that the generosity of the Father is also radically true. In the same way that the unexpected forgiveness that the younger son gets sort of blows our minds, but we know it can happen. In the same way that the disrespect that the older son gets frustrates us, but we know it can happen. So too the generosity of a father who loves both of his children is not too far off the purview from those of you who have more than one. You've all heard stories of people who love their children. My sister-in-law, who had 3 kids, when they used to fight, used to look at him and say, I'll love you all the best. And then they'd argue about which one was the best. Because that's what kids do. But the reason why this is the greatest story ever told is because it is a story of eternal love. It is a story about a love between a father and his 2 sons. It is a story about love that exists because we know in our heart of hearts it's true. We don't want it to be true, but we know it is. Because you see, it's easier if love is like a pie. And if love's like a pie, then you know there's this much. And it doesn't really matter how many pieces you cut into it, that's much. You know, like my dad always used to tell my mom when she'd make a pie, honey, cut it into 6 pieces because I can't eat 8. To which my brother and I said, oh, don't even bother cutting it. We can do it in 1. And that's how we want to think about love. That it's kind of boxed in, it's kind of in there in its own little shell, and it's kind of ready there, and you can take as much as you want, but once it's gone, it's gone. Once that love is all used up, there's no love left and no more for you. That's how we want to think about love. We do it all the time. We want to be right. We want to be the ones who are loved. We want to be justified. And those people over there, they don't deserve it. Those people haven't worked for it. Those people have squandered it. Those people have given that love away to Green Bay Packer fans. Nobody does. No. It doesn't work. But of course, that's not what love is. Love isn't like a pie. There's no such thing as running out of love. You can't run out of love. You just love and love and love and love. And then when you get tired, you know what you do? You love and love some more. But that's precisely what frustrates us, and that's why we know this story is true. Because we want to have that love for us, and we don't think we deserve it. Or we want to have that love for us because not only do we think we deserve it, but you don't. And the story of a father and his two sons drives us nuts because it points to the reality that God's love is for everyone, including the people we don't like, which more often than not is the person you're looking at in the mirror. But these waters of baptism are designed to show us that the love of God is eternal. Right now, God loves 7.5 billion people, give or take. You know what happens when it gets to 8 billion? God loves 8 billion. You know what happens when it gets to 10 billion? God will love 10 billion. Because that's how love works. There is no limit. There is no limit of time. There is no limit of amount. There is no limit of anything when it comes to God's love. It is eternal. It is unlimited. It is endless, like a song. So Jesus told a story as old as time itself, about a father who had two sons, and about a father who loved his two sons, and about a God who loves all of God's children. Those who stand there patiently doing the work that God has asked them to do, as well as those who sometimes go to the far country and throw that love somewhere else. And we as those children, get to live in that love. Because as it was true for that father and his two sons, it's true for me and you. There's always enough love to go around.